and it's officially time to start. So welcome guys, welcome to London, welcome to the docks. Today it is 31st of August, Thursday the 31st of August, and it is 8 p.m. UK time. And so we are in the docks. Welcome guys, welcome everyone. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. You've got the chat, feel free to use it, don't be shy, express yourself. And you can also support me with a little tip. You should have the links at the top. And for the ones that don't know me, I'm Nathalie, and let's go. Oops. So I'm in a lovely little garden here that's quite new. It's called the Crossrail Gardens. We are, would you believe, in a train station. We are on top of the new Canary Wharf station on the new Elizabeth line. So this is the new train line that opened a year and a half ago now, I think it's been. Big project, nearly 20 billion pounds. This station itself, it's 500 millions. And this little garden, it's quite interesting because you've got plants from all over the globe. As we go out, you'll see a bit better, but the building itself has been built in the dock, literally in the water, and it is in the shape of a ship, because we used to have a lot of ships over here. And we've got different plants behind me. It's plants from the east. So Japan, Philippines, Australia. In the middle, it's plant from the center of the globe on the map we're used to. So we're talking Europe, Middle East, or anywhere down there. And on this side, it's plant from the west. So Alaska, Peru, the US, Canada. So it's hi Nick, welcome. It's quite interesting, and it's a beautiful little garden. It's fairly new. It literally just opened when the new station opened. And if you know your London architecture, you might be already able to recognize the architect that designed the building, because he loves those little triangles. Does that remind you of any buildings in London? Any guesses? Yes, it's a very relaxing place, yeah. And we are in the middle of the hustle and bustle of Canary Wharf. Yes, exactly, the Gherkin. So it's the same architect. It's Norman Foster. So the Gherkin and the former City Hall is built with those little triangles. The City Hall has now moved. It's in the docks as well now. Officially, it's to save money to the taxpayer, I think. And so yeah, the station. So this is the new Canary Wharf. The other Canary Wharf station is just a few meters down. It's on the Jubilee line, and that was voted. I think it's 2014. It was voted Londoners' favorite train station. The other Canary Wharf, and it's the busiest station with a single tube line in London. In Canary Wharf, in the other one, well, in this one as well, people queue to get on the tube. If you've ever come to Britain before, you might have noticed we do like a good queue over here, but usually we don't queue to get in the underground. Here we do, so that's quite interesting to see. Those business people are quite civilized. And we are in a place called the Isle of Dogs. We don't know for sure why it's been called the Isle of Dogs. If you looked at the map, the London map, you'll see it's like a tear-shaped piece of land over the river. And there's a little bit of an urban myth that states that it's called the Isle of Dogs because Henry VIII kept his hunting dogs here at the time when Henry was spending a lot of time on the other side at the Palace of Placentia. But that's very much debatable. It was a bit wetland over here, so why would he keep his dogs over here? Some say that it came from another term. So it might have been the Isle of Dykes. When I say dykes, I don't mean lesbians. I mean dikes, like a little embankment to stop the flood. I say that because I didn't know what a dike was before to do the research for that tour, and so I was like, ooh, an island full of medieval lesbians. Ooh, that's interesting. But no, it's not this type of dikes. So yeah, it could have evolved. We don't know for sure. Anyway, this is the beautiful Walala Tunnel. So this is paradise for Instagrammers. That was created September 2020. It was part of the mural festival. Let me show you the name. So if you wanted to Google Camille Walala, or if you wanted to follow her on Instagram or anything, there she is. It could be the Isle of Ducks, yeah. Well, you know what I find interesting, it's probably a complete coincidence, but you know the Canary Islands? We are in Canary Wharf here because we used to get a lot of cargo from the Canaries, mainly bananas. And the Canary Island, it's not named after the canary bird, it's named after canis, canine. So Canary Islands, it literally means Isle of Dogs. So it's an interesting coincidence that you know, it's basically the same name. Talking about the Canary Islands, I'm taking you to Tenerife beginning of October. And yes, the name Canary Wharf is definitely because we traded with them. Yeah, there was a dock here that used to receive a lot of cargo from the Canary. And so yeah, Camille Walala, she does some amazing stuff. It's always very colorful, so I think that's great in London, because sometimes, you know, London can be a little bit grey, you know, especially in the winter. Camille Walala, she's getting quite popular. She's a designer originally, and let me show you. You might have seen some of her work in my tours before, like those lovely seats when we went around Bond Street area. She's being commissioned for quite a lot of work in London nowadays. She's French, but she's a Londoner. She's been here like 20 years, I believe. And if you come at daytime, you often have a lot of Instagrammers all around here. Some of them doing headstands, or some of them like lying on the ground or anything for a photo shoot. And I think it could also be quite fun if you were into illegal substances, like ketamine or anything like that. That would probably be quite fun to stand in here. Camille Walala designed the poster for the Montreux Jazz Festival. Oh, cool! I've not seen it, but yeah, I quite like what she does. It's always very colorful and very geometrical, you know. Yeah. Anyway, let me tell you a bit more about the history of the docks themselves. London is a port city. It's always been a port. The very reason why the Romans settled here, it's because it was quite convenient with the Thames River to do some business with the continent. And the Port of London has moved quite a few times over the years, and yes, exactly, Kurt. They've lost Walala, and they've lost me. Anyway, the port has moved a few times, and at the time of Queen Elizabeth I, she was worried that some of the cargo, some of the goods coming into London might not always pay their taxes. So she built 20 little quays. When I say quays with a Q. Keys. I'm a bit worried with YouTube subtitles sometimes. So not keys like a door key, because that would not make any sense. So she built 20 little quays in around the Tower of London, and Oh, did YouTube say key? Okay, yeah, sometimes I know that it's a robot, you know, so we can see the DLR in the distance. The DLR is the Dockland Light Railway, or Disneyland ride, because it's quite fun. It's an amazing view. And so yeah, Queen Elizabeth the First built those little quays so she could check on the taxis, but those quays were not enough, and you had a queue of boats coming to unload their cargo. You're still watching me from France, so yeah, you're right. With the internet, we can be everywhere at the same time. And I was telling you earlier that the station itself was built in the shape of a boat. We can see it a bit better from here. We can see it's in the shape of a boat. And yeah, so those little quays were not enough. Some of the cargo was actually, all the perishable would kind of go off, because it could take hours or even days to unload a ship, you know. So you had those queues of boats waiting for those little quays. And we also had a lot of pirates. I know when I say pirates, you probably imagine Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff. Anyone stealing from a boat is a pirate. Whether it's in the Caribbean or on the Thames River, they are pirates. And the punishment for piracy was the capital punishment. They used to, is that a jacuzzi boat? Oh, that's a barbecue boat. See those little boats? You can rent them and have a party. I think that's a barbecue one, because it smells like food. Unless it comes from behind me, because they also do jacuzzi boats, but they had a lot of bad publicity in the press a few months back, because when you do the jacuzzi one, you are on your swimming wear, you know, and people go on the bridge and they take hundreds of photos of you, and it actually feels, it can feel a bit uncomfortable. Anyway, so yeah, you had a lot of pirates, and the pirates, they were dealt with by the Admiralty. The Admiralty did not have any land, so they dealt with the pirates at sea, or whatever was closer to the sea, the River Thames. They used to wait for the tide to go down. The tide is, the River Thames is tidal. It goes up and down following the sea levels. And they'll wait for the tide to be out, so you had like a beach area. They'll place the gallows there. They'll hang the pirates with a short noose, so their neck were not broken, so they were struggling, gasping for air. And when they were struggling, trying to breathe, they used to move, so that made like a little dance. They called it the Marshalsea dance, because a lot of the pirates were actually locked in Marshalsea prison before to be hanged. And once they were dead, they would leave them there, hanging, for 3 tides, to metaphorically come and wash their bodies away from their sins. And that happened at Execution Docks. It's just after the Tower Bridge on this side of the river. And those dead pirates, with the water coming in and out, they used to get a bit bloated, so they were called whoppers. And that's probably how we got the name, the idea, the name of Wapping. You know, the district of London behind the Tower Bridge. It's still called Wapping today. We believe it's because of those bloated pirates. Those the DLR is up there again. Those whoppers. And the most notorious pirates, their bodies would be taken down from the scaffold. They'll be shaven everywhere, coated in tar, and then they'll be placed into a gibbet. A gibbet, it's like a metal cage. Some people pronounce it a gibbet, but it's not a gibbet, it's a gibbet. If it was a gibbet, it's an old French term. So if it was a gibbet, there'll be a U in there. So that's a gibbet. So they'll put the dead pirates back into a gibbet as a deterrent. So when you sailed up the River Thames, you definitely see a dead pirate on your way. Actually, the area of the Greenwich, the O2 Peninsula in Greenwich today, apparently in the 1700s, they used to refer to it as up a gibbet. Because when you sailed past, you would definitely see quite a few dead pirates. And it was quite gruesome. Some, according to some, in around Deptford and stuff, you had some kids throwing rocks at them to see if any body limbs or body part would fall down. So quite disgusting. And it did not really work as a deterrent. About 4% of the goods were stolen anyway in the 1700s, before to even reach London. And that's why Robert Milligan, he was in the sugar trade from the Caribbean. He got annoyed, and he had the idea of building the docks. So those docks were like a fortress, really. The docks were surrounded by a large wall, so it made it much more difficult for the pirates. And it basically solved the problem. So the docks were really, really active until the Second World War, and then they were bombed quite dramatically. We're talking 25,000 bombs in the Dockland area, and it's a, you know, if you are the enemy, if you want to attack a city, it's a good idea to bomb the docks, because of course, you know, we are on an island. It might be the largest island in Europe, but we are on an island. So you know, you could cut us off from getting some goods and stuff. And very sadly, the docks were very much damaged, but they recovered. They completely recovered, and actually the year when they were the most active, it's 1961. But then we invented the shipping containers. You know, those very large shipping containers, they were amazing because the container is the warehouse. So there's no need for warehouses anymore. The container is also a warehouse. But, by the way, talking about warehouses, Canary Wharf, do not let anyone tell you that wharf is an acronym. Some say that wharf is an acronym for warehouse along the riverfront. That's not true. It's Old English, so it's a word of its own. It's not an acronym. And so yeah, those boats were way too big to come all the way down to London. So the port of London has now moved all the way to Tilbury, much closer to the estuary, and hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs because nowadays, you know, the job is mainly done by machines and computers. So that's why this area was this area was one of the poorest already, and most of what we see today, it's actually been redeveloped in the 80s under Margaret Thatcher. The DLR, it's from the 80s as well. The DLR, when they first opened it, there was a tour guide on board to make it attractive, you know, to make it like an attraction to go and work or explore the newly built Canary Wharf. I thank you, Lance. Apologies, it's a bit noisy, but let me show you this beautiful statue. This is called Return to Embrace. It's quite a nice one because it's hard to tell which limb belonged to which character. And by the way, it's not. I know that Return to Embrace, it sounds a little bit COVID-y as a title. It's not. It's from. I think it's from 1999 from an artist called John Buck. So it has nothing to do with COVID. Oh, thank you so much, Natasha. Right, let's go and take a quick look at Cabot Square. So named after the explorer, John Cabot. A lot of the names around here are named after countries where we used to get some cargo from, so some of the names are original, and some of the names are actually, they've been created when they redeveloped in the 80s. So some streets have names very much related to the shipping industry, so some are actually more modern. But when you see Cabot Square or Mudchute, that's all from back in the days. And all those buildings here, so the redevelopment started in the 80s, but it keeps growing, you know, it never stops growing in the Isle of Dogs. There's a lot of offices here, but not only. You also have quite a few flats, and it's not necessarily only very, very expensive flats, because we have a legislation in London called Section 106. If you are a property developer and you're going to build a massive development, you have to include some social housing. So it's quite good. This way it's not too segregated. Well, you don't really have to. If you prefer to pay a penalty fare, you can pay a penalty fare, and that money would be distributed to the local authorities for them to create those social housing. So in the middle you've got One Canada Square there. On the left hand side you've got the HSBC, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation. So we are still today in a place full of bankers and traders and journalists as well. A lot of the press has moved here when Fleet Street kind of stopped trading in that industry. And this beautiful statue here, it's from Lynn Chadwick. Would you care to guess, or you might remember, some of you that have done this tour before, what he has named it? Any idea? How would you call this statue? I'll give you a clue. It's not massively original. How would you call it? It's from the 80s. I think it's 1984, this one. Oh, thank you, Janie. How would you call it? It's very basic. No need for too much imagination. It's the same artist as, yes, exactly, Couple on Seat. It's the same artist as we've seen on Piccadilly, you know, King and Queen. Yes, exactly, Tish, on the Fortnum & Mason facade, yeah. And yes, so this is Couple on Seat. Let me show you another statue on the other side of the street that also has a quite basic name. Let me go down without falling down. There we go. So we'll cross over. Let me press the button. This red light makes noise, but it's not always the case. Sometimes for people that do not see well, you have a little vibrating thing under the button. Anyway, how would you call this statue? Again, it's the statue is amazing, but the name itself is not massively original. How would you call it? It's from the 1990s, I think, and the artist is Giles Penny. Exactly, my pops. It is two men on a bench. So lovely, lovely statue. Not the most original title, but quite a beautiful one. Oh, front and back, that would have been quite cool as well, Michaela. Yeah. Anyway, let's cross the dock again. So we are here in the West India dock. So in this part of the docks, they used to receive a lot of cargo from the West Indies. So tea, rum, not tea, rum, sugar. On the other side, you had a lot of spices in the East India docks. So on the other side, you could smell the spices, and on this side here, you could smell the rum. Apparently, when you came here, and so the dockers, it was a very hard job. You had, well, the standard dockers, it was a very little pay. You had another job title called the stevedore. The stevedore was a little bit more qualified. because the stevedore was the one loading up the boat. So if you wanted to be a stevedore, you'd have to have some basics of geography. Because let's imagine your boat is going all the way to Australia, Melbourne or Newcastle or anywhere in Australia, and you going on a boat with a lot of cargo, a lot of beer, why not, gin probably, and pianos. We used to manufacture quite a few pianos in Camden. Let's imagine the pianos are for Cape Town, so the boats would stop in Cape Town on the way. So you had to make sure that the pianos were easily accessible, because if the stevedore was no good, then you'd have to get to Cape Town and then unload a lot of other stuff to get the pianos, and then that'll be a nightmare. So the stevedore had to be a little bit more qualified, but the rest of the dockers, they had no qualification, and they would be on very low pay. To give you an idea, in the 1880s, that was 5 penny an hour. They had some bonuses sometimes when they were very quick, and 5 penny, that was the price of a pint of gin, or a big loaf of bread. Or the job of a prostitute in a dark corner. We might have spoken about that in my Jack the Ripper tour. In the middle of your screen now, you might see some of the old cranes. So those have been left here as a little souvenir of the industrial past, really. And so those dockers, they never knew how much work they were going to get, because they never knew how many boats were going to come into the docks that day. So every morning you'd have maybe 200, 300 men queuing up, hoping for a day of work. And then you'd have the foreman. The foreman was coming to choose whoever was going to get a shift that day. Yeah, there's a lovely little duck there. In terms of marketing, it's an amazing thing they've done. It's for the game, it's called Fair Game. It's a bar that does games. But everyone going on a little boat, you know, they take photos for Instagram, they pose with the duck, and then the branding Fair Game is all over Instagram. Now they even listed on Google Maps. Now you have the duck boy on Google Maps. So great marketing, whoever had the idea. Anyway, back to the dockers. So they'd come on queue every morning, and the foreman, well, most of them, some of them were honest. They would just pick the men that looked the stronger. That was their job, you know, and they'll give them a little token. So the token was a day of work. Some of the foremen, they would just drop the token on the floor and let the men fight for it. In a way, the stronger was going to get it, and they wanted a strong man to do the job, you know. But those fights could be very violent. Let me show you why. The dockers, they had hooks like this. So that was to catch the bags from the cranes. Imagine fighting with that. Some of those fights could be very violent. They're called bag hooks. I think in America you sometimes call them San Francisco hooks, because of course you had a lot of docks in San Francisco as well. And the dockers, they didn't really have such thing as a uniform, but let me show you a classic docker. So that's quite a classic outfit. If you see around his knees, it looks like he's tied up some shoelaces around his knees. That was to stop the rats, because there was so much sugar here. There were a lot of rats. And if you look at his hat, it's also quite typical, because they didn't have a locker. So if they wanted to bring a snack, a little sandwich or whatever it might be, they'll have to hide it in their hats. Because if they left it somewhere, it would be stolen by the rats or by the other dockers. You know, people were very poor in the area, so they would definitely have taken it. And so very difficult job. And I've listened to quite a few interviews of people that either worked in the docks or their father might have worked in the docks. And is that where the idea of Captain Hooks come from? Well, I don't think so, but it could have. And there was a big wall as well. So right outside of the wall, you'd have a lot of a lot of ladies of the night, because very often when the boats arrive, all the sailors, that's what they wanted to spend their money in. We might have spoken about that when we talked about Mary Kelly the other week. And I was listening, for example, to a little girl. Well, she's an old lady now, but she was being interviewed and she talked about when she was a little girl. She lived in Poplar, so just on the other side of the big wall that protect the docks, from all those pirates and everything. And for her, it was like if her dad worked in a secret magic land, like almost like Narnia, because she could see the wall, but that was it. She would never go to the other side of the wall. And she could see the mast coming out. Like if you stood here at the time, you probably wouldn't see the other side of the dock, because you could have 600 vessels in here. So it was like a forest of mast. So the little girl said every day her dad would go and he'd go behind the wall, and it was like a mysterious secret land. And even after the docks were built, so we're talking 1802, really, you had the wall and everything, but there were still quite a few criminals around here. Not all of them were amazing. Some of them would just steal a bit of tobacco and hide it in their socks. They were not allowed to have big pockets, because they did not want them to steal any of the goods. And one of the worst criminal I've heard of here, it is they had those night watch. They had some kind of a police force to check on the docks, and those night watch, a few of them have been found dead in the docks. They could have fallen. We didn't have this barrier here at the time, so with a lantern in the dark, it's quite easy to fall in the docks. Or they could have been pushed. If you get caught by the night watch, well, you might as well kill the night watch. Who knows? And there's a story, it might have been a bit exaggerated, but apparently one day the night watch was coming in the distance down there, and he spotted 3 men completely drunk. They couldn't walk straight. They were like going from one side to one side, hugging each other. And the night watch was, of course, intrigued, because how would they get so drunk if they did not steal any rum? Because we had those men called monkey suckers. They would literally drill little holes in the barrels. Everything was stored in barrels over here. And they'll just pump out the rum. So they were drinking out of the barrels. So the officer got a bit closer, and he realized it was not 3 men. It was 2 men on a pig carcass. They had stolen a full pig. They had dressed him up with human clothing, and they were trying to get the pig out. Like they had the pig's legs around their neck, trying to make it walk like if it was a human. So obviously that was not very discreet. The men were a bit drunk, so they got caught. And there's another one that's probably much more recent. A girl that had her dad working here as well. She said one day a colleague of her dad he stole a steak, a frozen beef steak, and he put it into his pants. That's where you can run the boat, by the way. So he put it into his pants, but he had a full day to finish, a full day of work to finish. And obviously when he had to get out in the evening, he was a bit worried that he would get caught. The steak, the frozen steak had started to melt, so he had a bloody patch between his leg from the steak. And he was really worried that he'll get caught. And apparently, when he tried to get out, they called an ambulance. They were worried for him. They thought he had an accident because he had a bloody patch around his leg. So yeah, that was a bit like embarrassing. Anyway, there's an empty plinth here. This is because I might have mentioned Robert Milligan, the guy that had the idea of the docks. Great idea. But the man himself, maybe not so great. It was not unusual for a man of his time, but he traded with the Caribbean, and when he died, he had, I think it's 526 slaves. So even before the Black Lives Matter movement, The statue became a little bit controversial. And eventually in 2020, Sadiq Khan, our mayor, decided to review some of the statues in London, and they decided to remove Robert Milligan. They've eventually decided to put him into this is the Museum of Docklands, so he's going to be in there in a special exhibition that highlights the links between the docks and slavery. So I think it's a good option, because this way we don't shy away from our history. Because, you know, if we completely ignore it, if we hide them away, you know, I think we need to learn about the mistakes of the past, right? So I think it's probably a good compromise. So he's not exposed as a hero outside, but in a special exhibit talking about the links with slavery. Anyway, let me show you those fantastic loophole doors. So this is what you'd have. To unload the cargo. So a lot of the cargo was coming into sacks or barrels, but often sacks for the sugar. And the dockers were at the top there, and they'll be grabbing the cargo with their hooks. Let me. Yes, exactly, Natasha. Tell the truth instead of honoring him. Yeah. Let me show you what it would have looked like at the time. So the dockers were up there trying to grab the hooks. So those doors are called the loophole doors. And on this one here, you can see all the original safety features, literally none. It was very dangerous. Quite a few dockers have failed, and some might have jumped. You know, it was a very dangerous job. And the shadow, so the shadow of the loophole door itself, yes, it looks like a little lady ready to jump. It's probably just a coincidence, but it does look like a human shadow here. And so you see the little piece of wood. It's going in. It's not flat. That's because they wanted the barrels and stuff to go in, of course, not to fall off. So this is the last remaining warehouse. It's now the Museum of London Docklands. It's a free museum, so if you are ever in the area, it's a very interesting one. And it's a bit dark, though. I don't know why. You know, some of those, because I don't have a great eyesight, some of those museums, you know, they try to make it a bit darker to have some kind of an atmosphere. But I've got trouble to read what they put on those little plaques and stuff when it's too dark. Anyway, let me just show you those little teeth. See those little teeth here on the windows? That's because they did not want anyone to get in, not even a tiny humans, because there were so many thieves around here, so it had to be protected, so no one would steal the rum or the sugar. Anyway, let's go down a bit further. So yeah, as we mentioned, there was we can say like a police force. It's not really a police force, but yeah, like the Dockland police. The police, by the way, the Thames Police was created way before the Metropolitan Police, 1798 for the River Police, because there was so much crime. There were so many criminals working on the river, so we had that police force before the Metropolitan Police. That's 1829, so 30 years later. And see the little dome in the middle of your screen now? Well, that was the lockup. Well, this one was actually to keep the musket for the night watch, but there was another one right on the other side that has now been destroyed. That was the lockup. So if you were caught doing anything dodgy in the docks, they'll lock you up for a night in there, and you'd be dealt with by the authorities in the mornings. Let me. So that's the cannon workshops. It's not. They didn't used to make cannons here. They used to make barrels, because At the time, everything was stored in barrels, you know, rum, of course, but gunpowder, anything could be in a barrel. And a lot of the goods were actually repackaged over here in the docks. So that's where the night watch used to stay, in this little building here. And so the rum would be into barrels. You had tiny, small, big, many different types of barrels. And the sugar was into sacks, jute bags. Now the jute, I have to confess, I did not even realize how much of an important material it was until I went to Dundee last year. When you go to Dundee in Scotland, you can visit the jute factory. And it's very interesting. The material, so it's like natural fibers. It was used for so many things back in the days. It could be the top of a coach, like a horse carriage, or it could be a jute bag to store the sugar. Very important material. Dundee was known as the she town or the she city because a lot of ladies worked into the jute factories and a lot of men were actually unemployed. This was at some point part of the Port of London Authority, this little building here. And oh, thank you, Kurt. Yeah, it's named after the cannon that stood there. And the jute material. Well, you might remember, you might have touched it before, like those big potato bags. It's very scratchy. It's not very soft. And those poor dockers, they used to have those bags on their backs all day. And on top of that, the sugar, when it gets a bit wet because of your sweat or because of the humidity of the docks, and then it dries again, sometimes it crystallizes. So imagine like hard caramel. You know, those hard caramel chunks can actually be very sharp. And those poor dockers, their backs were often full of blood because of the jute, because of the caramel or the crystallized sugar. That's why this little street here was dubbed Blood Alley, because those jute bags, they were full of blood from the dockers. And those poor dockers, they could ask to be on a different product the next day, but then they might go into cement. So then they might have all the dust from the cement going into their wounds. So it wasn't much better. And let me show you what the alley would have looked like at the time, because they used to wash those bloody jute bags and then they would dry them down here. Sometimes they were not very well washed, so they still looked a bit bloody. So that's why they called it Blood Alley. And on the other side, to the left, you had it led to the trains, so the goods could be dispatched on the trains and then taken all across the country, really. And so the dockers, that was a very difficult life. They were struggling to feed their kids. That's why this area, Poplar, was one of the poorest, really, in London. And those Victorians, you know, those wealthy Victorians, they used to do what they called slumming. So they'd come with the beautiful horse carriages and they'd come and take a look at the poor, like if they were going to the zoo. That was a horrible practice called slumming. And eventually in 1899, there was a big strikes. The dockers were not happy. They felt cheated, and they were cheated with their bonuses. When they were a bit quicker than they should have been, they were meant to get bonuses. And there was a massive strike that led to the creation of the Labour Party. Some of those gentlemen, like Will Crooks, you might remember. We've been to his grave in Tower Hamlets Cemetery. So that led to the creation of the Labour Party. And eventually, at the beginning of the 20th century, the docks were pretty much nationalized, and then it was a bit easier. It was still a very hard job, but they then finally had a minimum wage if they were not picked for a job that day. Really not much, but at least they could try to feed their families. And some of them, apparently, when they were not picked for a day of work, well, they went to play football. You had the East India Dock team and the West India Dock team. They'll play football a few hours and they'll come back in the afternoon to see if any boats had arrived. So still a hard job, but at least a little bit a little bit better than it was in Victorian times. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Thank you for coming, guys. My bicycle is waiting for me here, and I have to confess I'm quite happy to see it in one piece, because I had a little altercation with a cyclist on my way in, a guy that was very much intoxicated and didn't know how to cycle, wanted to crash straight into me, and I accidentally gave him a few hand gestures, so I was a bit worried that he was gonna attack my bicycle, but no, all good. So we are safe. I'll get home safely. And thank you very much for coming tonight, guys. If any of you gave me a little tip on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal, you very much appreciated. I cannot thank you live because I don't see them here, but do make sure you know. Oh, your boyfriend lost teeth from, yeah. Well, sometimes cyclists are the worst. Well, this guy I think he was completely drunk, but he's coming, I'm in the cycle lane, on my lane, minding my own business. He comes right into me, and he's the one shouting at me. He came from the pavement, he shouldn't even be on the pavement anyway. But then, I mean, I say nothing, like everyone makes mistake, right? And then he's shouting at me, insulting me on stuff. So yeah, my fingers lift up on their own. But yeah. Anyway, thank you, Tish. Thank you, my pups. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Herbivore. So if you want to see a bit more of me, I've not scheduled my next tour yet, but do make sure you give me a little subscribe if you've not subscribed yet. It's very easy to miss those live tours because I feel like YouTube is quite good at promoting videos, but in terms of visibility for the lives, I think there's still some work to do. So make sure you do subscribe, so you're more likely to see them on your home feed whenever I go live. Thanks, Patricia. Thanks, Tish. Thanks, Kurt. Have a great evening or morning or whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And oh, you like the hoodie? Yes, that's hipsterish Alice in the Wonderland. And cool. Bye, everyone. I don't see any more questions, so I'm gonna get going. And I'll see you soon. Bye bye. Keep YouTubing.